what we're going to cover today is going to be all about the one-to-one. I'm sure we have some people here who are experienced design leaders. We may have some people who are also in other industries joining us, or you might be new to leadership altogether. So this talk is designed to help you get a handle on how to build collaborative relationships with the people that you're going to be working with. So we're going to start by talking about why one-to-ones are important and what you can gain by doing them with your team members. We're going to talk about some tips for building collaborative relationships, as well as how to structure a one-to-one agenda in order to do that. I'll talk about how to break the ice when you first start working with someone, some different scheduling tips for you as a manager to help you manage the volume of new meetings that you might have in terms of, oh my gosh, I have 7 people I have to do one-to-ones with, and what that could look like. Tips for having tough conversations with people on your team and how to address different types of situations, how to make the most out of your own one-to-one as a people leader, and then finally we'll end with a Q&A session. So with that, I'm going to just talk a little bit about myself and my own qualifications. So as I mentioned, my name is Breanna Clemens. I'm a design lead here at Headway. I've been a design lead at Headway for the last 2 years. And prior to that, I was a designer at a global marketing agency. And what we did there was very complex. I led a large global design team. And I actually started leading that team 2 years after graduating from university. So I had the role for quite some time. I was at that company for about 7 years. So total, I've been in the design industry for 12 years with 8 years of design leadership experience. And I'm also based in Connecticut. So if you're interested in connecting with me, you can check out my social media that is listed on the lower side of the screen there. And otherwise, I hope you all just sit back, grab a snack, enjoy the talk, and we will get right into it. So before I get started, I just want to let you all know a little bit about Headway and what we do here. So our expertise here is launching and growing digital products. We work with a variety of different businesses. So my leadership experience, while it also includes people management, I do a variety of work with startups and also enterprise groups. I do a lot of creative direction, so that you have some context around kind of what my day-to-day looks like and the types of things that we're doing here at Headway. So to kick things off, I'd love to talk about why have one-to-ones. So I believe that one-to-ones are some of the most important meetings on your calendar. When you're working with people, it is extremely important to build a positive rapport with them because you're going to be talking to people regularly and they're going to be coming to you with all sorts of different situations. You want to be able to not only help them grow in the direction that they want to be growing in, but you also want to have a strong enough relationship where they can really approach you with anything. You're the person as their manager who they're going to be working with most often. You may have other people on the team that they're collaborating with, but you really need to establish that you guys are a team and that you're there to help them. And the one-to-one is really one of the only opportunities that you can do this, because if you think about some of the other meetings or a lot of the meetings that you have on your calendar, you're very rarely in a room or a digital Zoom with more than you're very rarely in a room with just one person. So you want to make sure that you do set aside time to talk to individuals as an individual and understand them. Otherwise, what can happen is their personality, their goals, their values, what makes them scared, what makes them stressed out, all of that can get lost in the shuffle if you're just constantly in rooms with others and you're not really taking the time to focus on just each person on the team. So as a people manager, building trust with your staff is one of the most important parts of your job. Each member of your staff needs to feel confident telling you hard things. Like I said, you're going to be their go-to, and they need to have full trust that you'll support them when things get tough. And again, you want to be able to celebrate the wins. And anytime someone comes to you with something, it's really important to be kind and be open to them, and building that trust in their abilities is going to be really crucial for you as a manager as well, because part of what being a manager is you have a lot of responsibilities that might be new to you. Maybe you're new to management altogether. You might be joining a new organization as a manager. Maybe you stepped out of management and are transitioning back into management. Or maybe you've been a manager for a long time and you could be managing at different levels. Maybe you're a direct manager, you could be a director or a vice president, but all of these leadership skills and having these one-to-ones with the people that are reporting directly to you and getting to know them and their abilities is going to help you have more trust in each person on your team. And that's going to allow you to delegate things to people and have full trust that they'll be able to get that job done, whatever that job may be. And finally, all of these things will not be able to happen if you don't focus on building a strong relation with each individual member of your staff first and foremost. So understanding what motivates each staff member is a critical piece in developing a high-performing team. So it's very clear that not everyone cares about the same things. You may have a team of one person, you may have a team of 10 people or more that you're responsible for, but each individual on that staff is going to have different and unique things that they care about. They're going to have a unique skill set. Not everybody is coming from the same background. They may not have had the same experiences. People will have different amounts of experience doing things. And then beyond that, people are just motivated by different things. So it's really important to understand and take the time to talk to everyone about how you can actually understand these things together and get on the same page. And it's important for you to do the same and tell your staff what you care about, what motivates you, and what you're aspiring towards. That way, everybody's on the same page. Things can move back and forth, and you guys can work together in a collaborative fashion. So ultimately, understanding each person's needs, motivations, and aspirations are really just going to help you be able to provide better guidance for your staff's career growth, understanding what skills they're passionate about, and then aligning with your staff in this way can help them to feel more fulfilled by the work that they're doing. Everyone wants to show up and enjoy the work that they're doing. That's the dream. And we as managers need to help our staff in that way. And for example, if you know somebody really likes doing a certain type of work, like maybe you have somebody on the team who is really passionate about design systems, or they're really passionate about mobile UX design. If you know that you have an opportunity coming up for design systems or mobile UX design, it's really easy for you to help make that person happy by giving them that project and helping them along in that way. But if you never had that conversation, you may not have that understanding and give that project to somebody else on the team, and without knowing, you could be letting somebody down. So just being transparent with everybody and understanding like, hey, this is what I'm doing, this is what, asking them what they're doing and what they're interested in doing, that can help to cultivate a much more collaborative environment where everybody can thrive together. So this is all great, right? Like everything's flowing and we're getting to know each other. You're having these one-on-one meetings, but how exactly do you go about doing some of the things I just talked about? So one of the things that we really believe in at Headway is something called an operating manual. So an operating manual is something that kind of summarizes what a person really cares about, what they're motivated by, and on the flip side, what things really stress them out. So anytime you start working with somebody, again, everyone here, I'm sure, comes from different areas within their career. If you're new to management altogether, as soon as you start meeting with your new team members, asking each individual these questions. Or again, perhaps you've been a manager for a long time and you've just joined a new organization and you have an entirely new team of people that you have to get to know and understand. Or maybe you've been at an organization for a really long time and somebody's just moved over to your team and you're meeting them for the first time, or you've worked with them for a little bit, but you don't really have the experience of working with them in a manager to staff member relationship. Establishing the groundwork of the operating manual is really important. So some questions that you can ask are, how would you like to receive feedback? Everyone receives feedback differently. I have folks on the team who really like talking to me and having a video conversation, and we'll go through feedback live on the call. I have some other people on the team who would prefer to have a written list of the feedback after I've provided it to them on the call, because then they can have a clear idea of what they need to action on. So different things like that, and just understanding how people like to receive feedback and if there's anything you should be doing to help them out with that. Understanding motivation, so asking somebody what motivates you to start, and then after you've started, what keeps you going. Those are going to be things that are going to help with getting projects and gaining momentum and keeping things on track. And then kind of as we're talking about track, what gets you off track or slows you down? I think that everyone has different things that scare them, or maybe they previously had a bad experience. And understanding kind of what those things are is really important, because then you can kind of keep tabs on those things and, understand people's warning signs, what their needs are when they're stressed out. And again, kind of like what makes them overheat. So some examples of this might be like, people wasting my time, or I feel really misunderstood when this happens. And just understanding kind of like what makes the people on your team tick is going to be really helpful. And then on this side of the screen, I think it's also important to understand kind of what people's goals are and what they're striving for. Everyone is motivated by different things. And what motivates you to start is a different question than what are your values, or do you have any big career aspirations? Some people are not interested in moving up the ladder, or other people are interested in really increasing their salary. And understanding and having those questions answered up front is going to help you align people with paths that can help them achieve the goals that they're currently striving for. And then finally, what can I help you with? Everyone is working on things regularly. You guys will probably talk about these things in your one-on-ones, and understanding what you can do to help somebody achieve something, or just to help them out, is going to be really helpful, again, in developing that trust with your staff, and showing up for them when you do offer to do something for them is really important, and agreeing on a timeline at which that is going to happen, or setting that time aside while you're talking to them is also going to be important. So aside from the operating manual, you're going to start having these meetings, and I wanted to talk about what the context of these meetings can look like. So at Headway, we really believe that the one-to-one agenda should be conducted by the individual that is meeting with the manager. So let your staff dictate the conversation topic. It's important that you balance the conversation both around what's happening professionally and what's happening personally. And one of the things that we really like to do in one-on-ones, but also in group settings, is personal and professional best. So we like to have a positive spin on things, but we also like to ask people what they're struggling with in kind of like both areas. And you want to be respectful of people. Don't make anyone share anything that they're not comfortable with, but I think it is important to understand kind of what's going on with people. We do bring our whole selves to work, whether we like to admit it or not. And it is important to really, again, just be there and let your staff know that you can help them in any way that you're able to. So remember that this is your staff's time to talk to you about whatever they would like. And in a lot of cases, you're probably going to have some things that you would like to discuss with them. But just remember that in most cases, not all, but most cases, what you're looking to discuss with them is probably a secondary priority, and you should let your staff kind of go over what their discussion points are first. And again, this helps to develop that relationship of trust. You're letting them know that, hey, this is your time. Let's have a conversation about anything that you specifically want to talk to me about, whether it's good, bad, both, whatever the case is. And then typically what I like to do is I'll let them know when they're done talking that I have something to talk to them about. And sometimes you may run over time. And in some cases, you may need to schedule more time to talk to them about something else. But really keeping that one-to-one time about them, I think, is really important. So in talking about the meeting itself, we typically like to structure the meetings in a specific format. Our one-to-one meetings at Headway are 30 minutes. once a week. Each person on the team meets with their reporting manager for that duration. And we like to spend the time in this format. So the first few minutes of the call is a personal catch up. I usually like to ask people what they're doing on the upcoming weekend. I meet with everybody on Thursdays, so I typically like to ask how things are going in terms of maybe they mentioned they were doing something really exciting the previous weekend, maybe somebody took a trip or went out with friends to a really cool location, or they did something really exciting with their family. I like to follow up on that and see how things went. And then ask, what are you doing this weekend? Or maybe somebody asked me what I'm doing over the weekend. I kind of try to go back and forth with them and just kind of establish that that nice, like, low-key vibe straight out the gate. And then the bulk of the meeting is usually started with this question of what's on your mind this week. So again, that signals to the person that I'm here for you. I'm ready to hear about what you want to talk about, and I'm ready to, talk. So the kind of bulk of that conversation is going to be about ultimately the status of projects. A lot of times folks want to bring up things that they're working on, or maybe there's something in Figma that they've been trying to do that they want to workshop with me live on the call. Maybe they're having a issue with a person that they're working with. Maybe it's a stakeholder or a team member that they're collaborating with. So we're ultimately doing a mini retro. And then the second portion of that conversation is going to lead into quarterly goals. So at Headway, we set goals on a quarterly basis, and we have a team goal board. Everybody on the team has their goals posted, and it's shared with the wider design group. So I typically like to just pull up the goals board and check in with everybody on a status of where they are. And sometimes folks are really crushing it and getting through everything. And then other times people have been really busy and they haven't had time to focus on certain things. So if that's the case, we'll sit down and take a look at calendars. I'll offer to help with certain things or encourage them to set aside time. We'll take a look at what they have going on in terms of project work that is unrelated to quarterly goals, and we'll try to workshop that together. And then the final portion of the call is a section called Lead Honestly. At Headway, we do use a program called Lead Honestly, which submits a mini questionnaire out to each staff member, and it also submits out a pulse survey, which is a 1 to 10 rating on different categories of work satisfaction, work happiness, team happiness, and we'll essentially take some time to go through the pulse survey, make sure everything's good. We may not go through it together on the call, but I'm always reviewing this ahead of time, and if I see something that looks particularly interesting within the questionnaire or something maybe that's jarring that I wasn't expecting, I'll definitely bring that up on the call. And then the last 5 to 10 minutes of this call is usually whatever I have to talk about with them. So that could be project updates or different things of that regard. So I just went through the full agenda. So I also wanted to talk about some different tips and tricks for one-to-one meetings in general. Meet weekly. I think finding a recurring time slot that works for both you and your staff member is going to be crucial, and meet at this time every single week. I always see people moving their one-to-ones, and I think that is probably one of the worst things that you can do. Because it's just signaling to your staff member that there's something other than them that's more important. So I really try to keep one-to-ones at the same time every single week. And if I have to move it, I definitely let them pick the time slot, because again, I really want to show that I'm here for them. Leadership is all about kind of being there for people and showing up for your staff. So just allowing them to have some say in that process is going to go a long way. And then also just meeting them where they are and making sure that, hey, if we agreed to show up at this time, like I'm going to show up for you and I'm going to be there and nothing else is going to be on my calendar. So that's my first tip. My second tip is if you have a lot of one-to-ones, so I have one-to-ones with 4 different people, and then I also have my own one-to-one with my manager. And what we like to do at Headway is one-to-ones on the design team happen on Thursday afternoons. So we block schedule all of them. So I'll meet with everyone back to back. So I have a 2-hour block or 2.5-hour block of one-to-ones on Thursday afternoons. And that is really helpful for me because I know that in my calendar when I'm setting up my week, that Thursdays is one-to-ones. That is the time that is dedicated to that. And I'm not going to book in any other calls or any other work during that time. And it's also helpful because you get into a nice rhythm of following the agenda, following the kind of cadence of the meetings. However, one thing that can be challenging about that block schedule is the context switching. Each person on my specific group of team members is typically on a different project or client account since we are a client-facing agency. And it's up to me to take really good notes during those meetings so that I can reference my notes from the previous week to make sure that I'm checking in on anything and following up on things that were brought up, asking how things are going, that sort of thing. And that definitely helps remove the need to remember every single little detail that was discussed. You can have a great memory, but I definitely think the context switching can be difficult, especially when there's like minute details being shared. Taking good notes is definitely helpful. And then my final tip is to check in with your teammates throughout the week. Like I said, I typically meet with my staff on Thursdays. So usually on like Tuesday, if somebody mentions to me that they're struggling with something, I will follow up with them. I don't do this for every single person every week. However, when things come up, or if I know somebody's going to have a tough conversation, I'll definitely reach out to them the day of and say, hey, like, is there anything I can do? And just send them a quick DM, give them support. And that definitely, again, is something that does go a long way with people. So the last piece of the actual meetings that I wanted to talk to you about is asking for feedback from your team members regularly. So it's really important to, every once in a while, I typically like to do this once a quarter. My manager likes to do this once a quarter as well. But every so often, it's really important to ask your staff for feedback very candidly. So the way this looks for me is I like to spin up a list of questions and I will take that list of questions with me to the one-on-ones for the week. And these questions are typically asked during that section of the meeting at the very end where we've gone through all of their priorities and things that they wanted to talk about. And I'm just going through kind of the things that are on my agenda. And in the case that someone fills their whole one-to-one slot, I'll just book separate time or I'll let them know, hey, like I'd like to go through this exercise with you next week or whatever the case is, and just making sure that we accomplish that at a different time. But what this looks like is I ask questions about overall happiness at work, career growth, team office culture, and feedback on myself and what it's like to work with me as a manager. And are there any things that I should do differently? And basically just taking a temperature of how are we doing? How is our working relationship looking? Are you happy? Are you happy with me? Is there anything we need to talk about? And it's really important to have those conversations. Like I said, about once a quarter, I think is a fair kind of timing for that. And the other piece with this is I like to switch the questions up every quarter. I never use the same ones. And I also don't send them out in advance. And the reason for that is I think that unless somebody tells me in their operating manual, hey, I really don't like being put on the spot, most people are okay with this. And I think putting people on the spot with these types of questions really does yield the most honest response because they don't have the time to like craft that perfect response or think about what they think the answer I want to hear is. And it is really a collaborative discussion around like, hey, give me some feedback. How are we doing? how is the business doing? What do you think the team is struggling with? How can I help? And just, again, kind of having that step back from like the normal day-to-day conversations. So to transition, I want to talk about difficult conversations because I think that as a manager, these are one of the core pieces of the one-on-one that is really important to understand how to work through effectively. Obviously, we meet with our staff, things might be going perfectly, and then all of a sudden something happens and you have to have a difficult conversation. So some of the most difficult conversations that managers have take place during one-on-ones. Ultimately, whenever this happens, the first step is to be kind. Let your team member know that you're here to help and support them to the best of your abilities. And be curious, ask questions, be very thoughtful about the questions that you're asking people. Don't pry, don't be aggressive, just be very thoughtful and kind. And then if you can't help or answer their questions directly, or if they've brought up something that you might not be an expert in, just offer to assist them with finding the right person who can provide a solution. And then my next piece of advice for this section of difficult conversations is to just treat others as they would like to be treated. So again, going back to your operating manual, hopefully at this point you've had that conversation with the individual. You know the types of things that are helpful to them. You know the types of things that really stress them out. You know how they like to receive feedback or how they like to receive help. And remember that each person processes these types of situations and feelings differently. So really leaning into that operating manual. Hopefully you've taken notes. You can pull that up during the call. There's different things like DISC profile and Enneagram and Myers-Briggs and all these different types of tools that you and your team may have done together. If that's something you've done, this might be a good time to reference that. But ultimately, just checking in with the person and being kind to them is going to go a long way. And then the last piece here is be vulnerable yourself and share past experiences that you had that might be similar. Timing of this is definitely important. Like, don't make the conversation all about you, but sometimes if somebody is coming to you with a tough situation that maybe you've been in yourself, you can help kind of tell them, hey, like I was in this position, this is what happened, I solved it this way, I felt like this, I totally understand how you're feeling. But really spinning it in a way that it's more helpful than just making the conversation about yourself and your own experiences, because it really should be about your staff member and what they need to, move forward. The other thing I want to bring up here too is that it's okay to not have all the answers. You're probably not going to have all the answers straight away. And again, in this type of a scenario, just be honest. Let your staff member know that you're not sure. You appreciate them bringing this to your attention and that you're willing to help and maybe talk about what that help could look like. But again, just being honest with them. Don't try to sugarcoat things or put together some story that isn't true. Just be straight with them. And then sometimes this could look like, hey, I don't have the answer, but I think this other person in the business might be able to help you, and offer to set up a time to talk together as a group, or have, again, depending on the situation, maybe you can just have that person reach out to the individual directly. Or perhaps it's a situation where there's like a mentoring opportunity and you might know someone in your own network that might be able to help somebody on your staff. So again, just using the connections that you have to help others can go a long way as well. In some cases, your staff may ask you a very technical question that you haven't uncovered yourself. So you may have to do some research or explore what different tools are out there to solve a problem. So again, making a plan with your staff member and just saying, hey, I haven't uncovered this myself yet. I'd love to spend some time researching and I'll get back to you. Or offer to do that in a collaborative fashion and workshop it together. Again, it kind of depends on the scenario. There may be some questions that are more protocol based, where you might need to speak to an upper level leader to understand well, what is the company's stance on this? And again, just letting them know, like, hey, I need to talk to you, somebody about this, and letting them know, hey, this is what the timeline looks like. I need to talk to this person. I'm going to talk to them by this date, and I should have an answer to you by this time. And then if something happens in that timeline, just keeping them updated. And again, just collaborate on that type of a situation. And the final scenario that I see come up in one-on-ones is maybe your staff member is having a tough time with another person and they have to have a difficult conversation themselves. So you could offer to attend that meeting to support them or practice having that tough conversation with them. So that way they can build confidence ahead of the real deal and feel more comfortable walking into that scenario. But again, just to recap, no matter what the situation is, let your staff know. You'll get back to them with an answer if you don't have the answer straight away, and make sure you agree on a timeline and follow up on that timeline if it changes for whatever the reason is. So the last section of our talk here is going to be talking about planning your own one-on-one with your own manager. So topics for your own one-to-one as a leader, these might look different than what you were previously talking about in other one-on-ones, but the key takeaway of this slide is to make sure that your one-to-one is about you and the things that you're working towards or struggling with, because when you lead a team of people, even if that team is a smaller team of maybe one or two individuals, it's really easy to get caught up in sharing what's going on with everyone else with your manager. And that's definitely a trap that I fell into. I spent every one-on-one for probably a 6-month period talking about what was going on with everyone else on the team and what was shared with me during one-on-ones, and just giving updates on projects and what people were working towards or struggling with, and trying to collaborate with my own boss on how to adjust some of those situations. But what ended up happening was that I found that I didn't have any time to talk about my own goals or things that I personally was struggling with. And I just want to caution people on that. And I think that the solution that we came up with was to have a separate meeting in which we recap, and we do, like I said, we do one-on-ones on Thursdays. So we meet on Fridays, and I meet with my manager and we talk through anything that came up in the week that we have to discuss as a team and address in that separate time. So that way my one-on-one is dedicated to myself. So talking about any big wins since you last met is really important. It's really great to, again, have this energy of positivity and talking about what's going great with projects, what's going great with yourself, wins that you've had as a leader, wins that you've had with maybe you've just had a breakthrough with somebody on the team and they finally accomplished something they've been working towards, and you can talk about what that was like. Talking about what you're struggling with, but also remembering to be solution oriented. Nobody likes a complainer. So it's really important to think about things that you're struggling with in a solution-oriented way. And coming to those conversations with ideas is also going to show that you are excited about being a part of the solution. Hey, I know this is a problem. I've thought about these different ways that we can solve it. I'd love to get your opinion is a really great way to format that conversation. If you haven't built your own operating manual, taking the opportunity to do that and then sharing it with your own manager is a really great thing to do. And then also kind of spinning it back and asking your manager about their own operating manual. Because again, it should be a two-way street. You guys should understand each other and what your values are, what your motivations are. And then on the flip side, what stresses you guys out, so that way you can get on the same page about how to work together more effectively. Asking your manager how you can help them achieve their business goals, understanding what they're focused on, especially if you're in a team environment where everyone is working towards one specific goal for a project or for the business. That's a really important thing to do. Discussing your own career aspirations, if you have any. A lot of times, this again is something that, like, once you've hit that management role, this could fall by the wayside. So if there's something specific you'd like to learn about leadership or within your industry, or maybe you're interested in moving up in the company, continuing to have those conversations regularly is important. And then finally, get to know your manager. Ask them about their past experiences, learn from them. They will probably have some really interesting things to say. And again, that's just going to help you continue to build more trust with your own manager. So with all of that being said, I'd love to recap what we learned. I know I just threw a lot at you guys, but our key takeaways are that one-to-ones are an essential ingredient in the recipe for success as a leader. And again, as a manager, getting to know your staff is really, really crucial in developing a high-performing team, understanding how people work, how you can better work with each other, how you can better pair people and teams to work together, and aligning people with things that they're excited about is really just going to promote a more happy and functional work environment for everyone. And some tips to do that I reviewed in detail were to establish an operating manual with each staff member early, and also to do this exercise with your own manager. Meet weekly and don't reschedule frequently. Let your staff members dictate the meeting agenda every week when you're meeting with them, and prioritize everything that you're looking to talk to them about as a secondary item. And then finally, collaborate with your staff member on solutions. So anytime something comes up that is a question or perhaps a difficult conversation, making sure that that plan is collaborative. And again, it's okay if you don't have all the answers straight away. It's more about being a team player and helping to solve for a solution.
I have a couple of questions, but yeah, if anyone else that's watching, whether you're on LinkedIn or YouTube, leave a comment, and then we can answer it live right now. So my first question, though, is for you, Breanna. What was the hardest part about the transition from being a designer to a design leader in your career?
Yeah, that's a great question. The hardest part for me, so again, just to talk a little bit about context, when I started managing a team, I had only been in the design industry for 2 years, and I was at a global market research company. So we had a team that was operating across 3 different continents at the time. So we had Europe, the Americas region, and then the Asia Pacific region. And my team that I was managing had 7 people on it, and they were all in different time zones. So I had people in the Netherlands, Romania, Australia, United States, London, so all over the place. And the hardest part for me in that time was kind of learning to balance the design work and the management, but then also this added flair of like, how do I get all of these people in all these different parts of the world to collaborate like a team when they're all working on different time zones? So, and I followed a lot of kind of what I went through in this presentation of like talking to people individually, asking them like, hey, what wasn't working for you with the last person who led this team? What would you like to see? Who would you like to collaborate more with? And like, what times of day are you available to collaborate? And we came up with this really cool schedule of like overlap and like daisy chaining information. So there was always conversations happening. And that was a really interesting challenge to solve for. And I definitely think that's not something that everybody's going to go through because it's, again, unique to the global environment. But I think like balancing is going to be a theme for everybody. So like in my case, I was balancing how do I like do my own work, but then also like project manage all of these other people. And I think one of the other things that I really struggled with was in this role, because I had 7 people, I was able to delegate a lot of work. And I really struggled with that because again, like you have to build trust with people and you have to go through that critical step of understanding people's abilities and like delegating the right thing to the right person. And then trusting that they'll do it correctly, I think is another thing. And then if for some reason you delegate something and it's not done correctly, like keeping your cool and just letting them know and being curious, like, hey, what went wrong here? Like, I thought we discussed X, Y, and Z, but you gave me A, B, and C, and like just kind of being very curious about where people are at, what they're doing, and then talking about what happened in a really thoughtful and kind way, I think is important.
We actually have a question over on LinkedIn. She shares any tips from people that work simultaneously as an IC and design lead.
Yeah, so I think scheduling your time here is going to be really important, and kind of making a list of what you have to do for both of those roles, and also just kind of figuring out like how much time you need to dedicate to both of those different roles. Because when you're operating as an IC, you have a lot of responsibilities that are tied to whether it's a project, or if you're in a agency environment, you may have different client things that you're working towards, or if you're like in an enterprise role or a freelance role, you may have a lot of responsibilities just tied to like the work that you have to do. And then again, you may have a separate set of responsibilities for that design lead portion. So taking time to understand your schedule and your responsibilities, I think, is going to be really important. And again, I think seeing if, and again, without context of your specific situation, if you're able to delegate any of your work out, that could be something that could help you. And again, working with your team on that, if that's potentially something that's available to you. And if not, just again, trying to prioritize the task for the week. I think as a design lead, you may have competing priorities with your responsibilities for your IC work. And being transparent with your team goes a long way, and just letting people know, like, if I have something like a big presentation coming up, I'll let my team know, like, hey, I might be a little more kind of like away from Slack this week because I'm going to be heads down focusing on this particular piece of work. But you can, like, if you really need me, this is how you can get in touch with me.
Oh, so Breanna just shared her computer just crashed. So we'll give her a moment.
We're back.
We're back. All right.
Sorry, everyone. My computer crashed.
All good. All right. Make sure we get to this question here, which I think is actually a very good question. Speaking to the benefit that you get from Lead Honestly, so that obviously they charge, $24 per manager. I guess I think the question is, is it worth paying for, other than like, it looks like he's using Google Docs for his process right now. Like, what are your I use Lead Honestly as well. I'm not paying for it, obviously, as a team member at Headway. But I guess, yeah, like, Breanna, what are your thoughts on Lead Honestly as like a tool for the team?
Yeah, so the thing that I really like about it is, it's automated. So it automatically picks the questions for you. There's multiple different playbooks. I think there's 6 or 5 different playbooks. And the playbooks have different focuses. So there's one that's about relationship building, which is a good one that I usually go to if I've just started working with someone. And the questions are really thoughtful. They're questions that I wouldn't have thought of on my own, or I would have had to spend time doing research for. There's also a playbook on current events. So with the design industry and just kind of tech in general, things are always changing. So the questions in there are really great because it'll ask people, like, what's something like a new piece of technology that you just read about that you're excited about. And again, they're questions that I may not have thought to answer. And the other thing that I really like about it is the poll survey. So it sends me an email every week, and it not only shows all of the individual responses that each person filled out, but it does take like a conglomerate and an average of all of the data for me. So it's interesting because some weeks, like, one of the questions we have is like, how do you think the team is doing? And there's weeks where like everybody's a 9 or an 8 or a 10 on the scale. And then there's weeks where it's like, I get a lot of 3s and 4s. So it's like, ooh, we got a retro. Like, let's talk as a team. Like, what's going on? Why is everybody unhappy? So I think, like, it depends on your needs. Like if you have a Google Doc set up already where you're doing a lot of these things yourself, like you have all of the questions, you're having everybody go in and fill that out and it's working for you, like great. But for me, like I said, it's the automation and just like removing that step from the process. It kind of does everything for us.
Yeah. I will say, like, I think, like you were saying, like the sentiment analysis, like how are people feeling? Like, I think Andrew, John, and Eric probably have a better sense of like the whole company, which is good for them, right? Like the more
Yes.
people that are using it, the more I think helpful it is. Like that's kind of the hard part. Like if you're like a really small team and there's only like 3 people using it or whatever, like it can be helpful, but I think, there are other ways to get the same kind of results. I do like that Lead Honestly like connects with Slack and it sends me the reminders. Hey, don't forget to fill out your Lead Honestly. You can, other than just the email reminder, there's just little quirks like that. But I think like the questions are sometimes surprising. You're like, oh, I never really thought about that. And then like, it's just like fun. It's either a fun or a very interesting conversation to really reframe like the work you're doing, or I guess I never, thought about like what they could do differently or whatever. Right. It's just like, I think surprising questions that can be very useful. But if you kind of already have a process for asking questions, I think the key thing is like, if you're able to like refresh the questions that are in that Google Doc pretty consistently, I think that really helps. Because if it's the same questions all the time, people are like, I don't know, whatever. Like, and sometimes Lead Honestly, I'll just be like, not sure. like I don't have an answer. And that's okay. So, but yeah, that's how I kind of feel about it too. It can be very beneficial, but I don't think it's like absolutely necessary for a team to be successful together. So
yeah, as long as you have a process that is similar.
mm-hmm.
And again, I think what you said about the team size. So our whole company uses Lead Honestly. So with, again, Jacob mentioned Eric, John, and Andrew, who are the owners of Headway, they get that roll up that I talked about with the aggregate data. They get that for the whole business. Mm-hmm. So we have a company dashboard and they're able to go in and look at oh, everybody's really low on this end. Like we should probably talk about that and figure out what we need to do to address that. So it's a really good tool for like transparency with that.
Yeah. Thanks again to Breanna for sharing everything, her expertise, sharing her story, answering questions, all that kind of stuff. Getting back into the stream. You've kind of like, I feel like the whole presentation was a journey in itself. So thanks again. And thanks to everyone for joining us today and asking your questions. And again, like I said before, if you have, or if you're watching this recording, if you have any thoughts or ideas on content you'd like to learn from our team or hear from our team, leave a comment, send us an email on our website, connect with us on LinkedIn or whatever. We'd love to, learn what you want to learn. So just I think that's all I got. A reminder to check out all our resources on our website related to design leadership, design systems, and UX audits. Be sure to check all that kind of stuff out. And if you're watching this and you're not a design leader, share this presentation with your manager and, start that conversation. Say, hey, I want to start doing this together. I'd like to see this from you. I think, calling them to step up and make some changes, I think is good too. So anything you want to share, Breanna, before we wrap things up?
I just want to say thank you again for hanging in there. We did have some tech issues, so I appreciate you guys for sticking around and for just attending. Please reach out if you have any questions. We'd be happy to chat with you guys. And yeah, thank you so much. Appreciate everybody's time.
Have a great day, everybody. Take care.